Yeah. We're on Hey Amid Aleph. Actually, we're in the very, very bottom of Dalet Amid Base, the last two words of Dalet Amid Base. Don't tell anybody. All right. Misakrin Kilkule Amayim Shirshus Sarabim. So you're allowed to dredge up an irrigation canal that got damaged. That you could do on Kulamoy, but you're not supposed to dig a new cistern on Kulamoy itself. So the Chatita in, so it sounds like if you have like a cistern that got messed up and you have to dredge it up, so you're allowed to clear it out. You can allowed to clear it out from debris. Chatita in. Kafir or low, but you can't dig it in the first place. That's only if the public doesn't need the water to drink. So it's generally understood. Maybe it's needed for other, purposes, but if you need drinking water for the public, that's a different story. But then you could even dig a new cistern on Chol Hamoed itself. Is that true though? Because we have a brisa. We actually have three brisas, so it's going to be a little confusing. The brisa number one seems to indicate that it wouldn't be okay, even if you had a public need for the drinking water. The Hatanya is a brisa that says, you can dredge up and you can clear away the debris from the wells and the ditches and the roofed caves that hold water if they belong to an individual. And obviously you can do it if it's for public need, but you're not allowed to dig in the first place the wells, the ditches, and the caves to hold water. Even if it's for the public, and it goes without saying, you can't do it if it's only for an individual need. So my lab is sharabim srikanahem. So we're not talking about when the water is needed for drinking purposes, immediately, as opposed to, let's say, laundering purposes or whatever. So we say, lo, now we're talking about where it's not imminently needed for drinking water. If it was needed for drinking water for the public, so then you could even dig them in the first place. Wait a second. The kavase gabi yachid, she'ein yachid et tzarech lahem. But if that's the type of case we're talking about, when it's needed either by the Rabbim or in the parallel case when it comes to the Yachid, that the Yachid needs it. So here we're saying the Yachid doesn't need it. Well, if the Yachid doesn't even need the water to drink, Shen Yachid Sarklem Chatita Mishari, so we wouldn't even allow for a Yachid, the clearing of debris, we wouldn't even allow. But Hatanya, because we have Brisa number 2 that says as follows. Brisa number 2 says, Hatanya, Bawa Shichan Ma'ara Shel Yachid, if you have these wells, ditches, and caves that belong to an individual, konsin mayim l'sochan, so you can steer water into them if they've already been dug. Aval, but you're not allowed to do even repairs. You can't even clear it from debris. Below chotitin, below shafin esidkein, and if the plaster between the stones fell off, you can't plaster the cracks. The shel rabbim, but if you're dealing with the rabbim, a publicly needed the well and ditch and cave and so forth. So then it will allow you to do those repairs. So therefore we see that if it is a case where a yachid wouldn't need it altogether, so we wouldn't even allow chatita. So let's go back then to the first brisa, where a yachid does need it. Then we have to be talking about where the rabbim also needed the water. The kavasik gabi rabbim, b'sharabim tzrikan lahem, and the first brisa seems to indicate that chapira is not permitted. Chapira miyaseh, but how could such a thing be that we wouldn't allow for the digging of the well in the first place if there really was a public need during Chol Hamoed that they needed to drink the water? But we have brisa number 3. Okay, brisa number 3 seems to indicate very clearly that it would be permissible, because brisa number 3 says, and that would be along the lines of what Rabbi Yochanan said. If we're dealing with these wells, etc., that belong to an individual, private individual, so then you can steer water into it. You can fix it up, to clear it of debris, dredge it up. But you're not allowed to plaster the cracks. That phrase is difficult to understand what it means. Below sudden osan besid, and you're not allowed to plaster them up. It's rabim, and if it belongs to the rabim, you could do forget the chotetin. We go all the way to the opposite extreme. The rabim, we can even dig the wells in the first place. Chofin osan, besadin osan besid. You could plaster them up, do a nice job. So elakasha hakamaisa. So, but now we have a kasha because the first price seems to indicate that at least the yachid is allowed to do chatita. So what's going on over here? And it says the rabbim are not allowed to do chatita, and here it says a yachid can't even do chatita. I'm sorry, yachid can do chatita. No, a yachid can do chatita but can't do chapira. And the rabbim can even do chafira, while the first prices seem to indicate that both the yachid and the rabbim can only do chatita, not chafira. So how do we explain the contradictions in the brisa? So we're going to explain right now. Yes.
What about rabbim and mumcha during Yom Tov? You can do it, right? Mumcha can do the work.
Mumcha, you're talking about, are you allowed to do kind of like a specialty job for rabbim purposes? So for rabbin purposes, it sounds like chapira certainly is a high level, kind of job. So that would be allowed for rabbin purposes if there is a need. If there is a need, there has to be an immediate need for. That's why it says rabbin strikan lahem. It would have to be that they had a need for yontiv during yontiv itself. It would also have to be sort of a bodily need, meaning that they need the water in order to drink and so forth. It can't be something that was not a bodily need. So that's the way that it's codified, like the Mishnah Berurah explains, that he gives you all the klolim in Siman Tov Kuf Mem Daled in Shulchan Aruch, and Tosfos over here gives you a little bit of klolim as well. If you take a look, he says that you can learn from here that you can't generally, water fields unless it's a dava of it. And then Tosfos towards the end says, and if you have a rabbim, so you can even do something which is a tirka yeseva, or requires some umnus, mutal is a lakvo the chatzkila, even the tzrika l'mayim, because you have rabbim who have this bodily need that they need the water. So then for tzarchei rabbim of bodily needs, we would allow even like a ma'isa uman, so to speak, during kol hamoed. Yes, Eddie.
Is directing the water through the channel into the board?
Well, when we say chotetin boas, generally what we mean is that the ditch got messed up, got a lot of debris in it, okay, and now I have to clear away the debris. When we use this expression in the last brisa that we say below chotetin the sochan, not entirely clear what that's referring to. It says you're allowed to clear it from debris, but it can be chotetin the sochan. Sounds like you're maybe expanding the ditch or something like that. Okay, but anyway, Taretz Hachi. So now, how do we resolve the contradiction between the first price and the third price? So when there is a need, either in the case of the yachid or in the case of the rabbim, that we allow more in the case of the rabbim than in the case of the yachid, according to the third price. According to the first price, it didn't seem like we discriminated. So we explain like this: Chotetin boros shel yachid. We start off talking about the ditches and the wells belonging to a private individual. So then you're allowed to fix them. You're allowed to clear them from debris. You can't dig them in the first place. You can clear them from debris when there is a need, when the yachid needs them. He needs to drink the water. I mean, obviously, if he's gonna, die of thirst, then we would allow him to even dig it in the first place. But the idea is it'll be a big tircha. He'll have to go somewhere else to get his water. It'll be a pain in the neck, but he's gonna survive. So we only allow him to do chatita, not kapir. And obviously, we're going to allow fixing up of a well when we're dealing with the public need. When the public needs it. Why? Because when the public needs water, even chapira, even digging is going to be permissible in the case of the rabbin. But we're not going to allow chapira even for the rabbim when the rabbim don't need the water immediately for drinking purposes on Chol Hamoed. Shel yachid, and certainly that would be true with respect to a yachid. So this is sort of the parallel between the yachid and the rabbin. Chatita is allowed for a yachid when he needs it, and certainly with respect to the rabbin. The rabbin are allowed to do chapira, but they're not allowed to do chapira when they don't need it, and certainly if a yachid doesn't need it, he can't do chapira. Because when a yachid doesn't need the drinking water, so then we wouldn't even allow chatita in the case of the yachid. Fine. So Amavashi, so chatita is always going to be permitted in the case of the rabbim, even if they don't need it immediately. Chapira is always going to be us in the case of a yachid, even when he doesn't need it. And chapira is going to be permissible in the case of the rabbin when the rabbin do need it. Amavashi masnisa nami deka. Our Mishnah also seems to support these distinctions, which are consistent with the statement of Rabbi Yochanan before. Diktani osin kol tzorchei rabbin. Because the last line in our Mishnah on daf base, not the last line, but close to the last line, the second to last line said after it discussed all the different things you're allowed to do, you can fix the roads and you can fix the mikvos and the osin kol tzorchei rabbin. You can take care of all public needs. Well, what is that coming to include? Kol asuyei mai lav asuyei chapira. Is not coming to include that you could even dig a well low. So say not necessarily. That's not necessarily a perfect proof. Why is it not necessarily a perfect proof? Maybe it's coming to include Hadatanya, that which the Brisa says, Yotzin the Kavetz Sadrachim, you can go and you can remove thorns from the roads, and to do infrastructure to fix the streets. Best ha istrataos, and you can fix the highways, and you can measure the mikvos to make sure that they have the requisite 40 sa'ah. If the mikvah doesn't have abba sa'ah, like 800 liters or so, margilin l'socho abba sa'ah, so then you can direct the water into it, so it will have 40 sa'ah. Minayim shim lo yatsu v'yasu koleila shekol dam shenishbuk l'sham malei aleim akiasu kiluim shavkum. Now that we know that if you don't go out and take advantage of this heter, and then people are going to walk through the streets and they're going to get hurt by the thorns, so they're going to go into the potholes because you haven't fixed the streets, and they're going to get hurt. It is considered as if you have shed their blood. Talmud Lomar, because it says, like with respect to the importance of erecting a makeh, a parapet around your roof so people don't fall off. The blood is on your heads, it's on your hands. So therefore, you have to you have a responsibility. If you're, to take care of the public has a responsibility to attend to all of these needs. So the Gemara says, wait a second, it can't be that the last line of the Mishnah where it says Osin kol tzorchei rabbim is coming to include these cases. You know why it can't be? Because these cases are already described in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said already, and then it says, can't include the cases that have just been described. So my love, it must come to include this case that Rabbi Yochanan said would be permitted, that you're allowed to even dig wells in the first place when there is a public need for drinking the water during Kol HaMoed. So Tosfos asked, so what was the kasha in the first place? Didn't they know like what the Mishnah said? So it could be that the questioner in the Gemara did not necessarily interpret the words Misakin and Hadrachim as being identical to clearing away the thorns. So maybe then that the last line that says Rosen Kol Tzorchei Rabbim is talking about clearing away the thorns. And then the second suggestion of Tosfos is mind-blowing, that maybe the kasha that person just didn't know the Mishnah that well. When they learn the Mishnah, they, lo isa shkur b'fiv, they didn't memorize that line. Very interesting. Okay, Messiah is a kavaros. So we mark the graves. You can mark the graves during Kol HaMoed. So I'm a Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. So we have 9 different, yes, sir.
Yeah, the difference seems to be that in the ratio of the Mishnah, it's coming to include things that are repair of things that already exist. But with regard to Chapira, now you're making something new altogether.
Okay, very good. That's Osin Kol Tzorchei Rabbim. You're saying it's not coming.
Strength existing, but not.
No, Chapira, you're actually digging a new well. Eddie's right. So you're saying that the Hasuya is not just, it's another case just like the previous cases. It adds another dimension. Very good. Okay. So I'm Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi.
Because in the
we have now. Yes, it's just exactly just to be fair. So now we're doing something new, but we gotta move on. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. So I'm Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. We have 9 different sources as to how we know. We have a remiss from somewhere in the Bible, somewhere in Tanakh, that we mark graves. So Remiss says, "Siyan kivaros min Torah minayin." Where do we find the hints of this practice in the Torah? Here we mean all of Tanakh. Talmud Lomar, etzem adam v'na etzlo Tzion, after the war of Armageddon, right? Gog and Magog. So you'll see bones of, the almost olam, the people from the other nations, the bones just lying around, and you'll put markers up. So it's only a remiss because there's no like too much oil you'd have to worry about with the non-Jews. Also, it's something which is very much in the future. Also, it's just like a bone. It doesn't necessarily convey too much oil that you'd have to mark, but nonetheless, it's a remiss. So Amalei, those are three different explanations given by various people around the page as to why it's only a remiss. So Amalei Ravina Ravashi. So Ravina said to Ravashi, "Amak midlaisi Yecheskel man Amar." But before Yecheskel came along, so who said such a thing? Yecheskel is not allowed. He's a prophet. He's not allowed to make up new mitzvahs. The Taimech, no, but according to you, Yecheskel sometimes said things that were essentially halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai. That we learned that a person who doesn't have a bris milah because their brothers died from receiving a bris milah, so therefore it was dangerous for this person to receive it. So he wasn't like a mummer in the sense that he didn't like repudiate the mitzvah of bris milah. He just couldn't get it for health reasons. He still can't do avoda. Even a person who's an arel basar, he's not an arel lev. He didn't rebel against Hashem, but he just doesn't have a bris milah. How do we know that he can't do avoda? There's a word here, l'sharseni, but that's not actually in the pasuk. So makmi delaisi Yecheskel man omer. So before Yecheskel came along, so who said such a thing? Yecheskel obviously didn't make up the din. It was a tradition and tradition. Yecheskel found a basis. He put it, into a pasuk. So Hachanami Gemara Gemimila. So here as well is a halakha l'Moshe b'Sinai. Yecheskel created a pasuk for it to teach us this idea that you should put grave markers next to graves. So Rabbi Yavo Mami Yacha. Rabbi Yavo has a different source. Source number 2. V'tamei tamei yikra. With respect to him, so he's supposed to announce tuma. Tuma koralo ve'omereslo a perush. That the Tuma has to announce that people have to stay away so that they don't become tummy themselves. But that's is that really what Tami Yikra teaches me? How the Tanya do you need for the following price of Tami Yikra? When a person is in distress, they're supposed to announce it to the public so that the public will pray, say Tehillim for the person. So you can't lift over Tami Yikra. No, but I could have learned that if it just would have said Tami Yikra. The fact there's an extra word Tami teaches me both. It might be Tami. So we can derive the second idea that when there's tumah lying around, so people, should be warned against it so that they're not going to just, not only kohanim, but even people who want to eat truma and so forth, that they shouldn't mistakenly become tummy. A third source, don't put a stumbling block in front of a person who doesn't, know better. A person doesn't know that they're going into a section where they're going to become tummy. So you have to put a grave marker so they're not going to become tummy. But proper fourth source, Amar, he brings the pasuk from Yeshayahu, solo pano derech, that you have to pave the way in order to clear the road. So you have to pave the way if there's a tumas to make it clear that people will have a clear road, that they're not going to encounter tuma. Rav Chinana just gives the continuation of the very same pasuk. You should take away any impediments from the road in which people walk. Rabbi Yeshua Breid Rabidi Amar Be'odat Lehem Esaderach Asher Yochuba. So he brings a pasuk straight out of Chamisha from Torah that you have to, teach the way that people can walk properly without becoming tamei. Right, correct. Marzutra Amar, Marzutra of the parsha coming up. Marzutra Amar Mizartes Bnei Sumi Tumasam. He finds also pasuk in Shmini that you should warn the people properly so that they can avoid becoming tamei. That you should provide a guard around like a railing so that people who want to eat truma will be protected and not become tamei. Ravina Amar, and then Ravina has the pasuk in Tehillim, which is with a sin. It says, "V'sam derech erenu b'yesha elokim." That you should place on the road for a place so that people will enjoy the salvation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So here you're making a simon so that people will be able to serve a Kadosh Baruch Hu, eat truma, not become tummy, and so forth. So from this last pasuk, which was the 9th source that we brought, so Rabbi Shua ben Levi, he says you could take that sin and you can move it to the other side of the letter, so it becomes a shin, and you can read it b'sham. Kol hasham or chosav zokev ro'ap yishuaso kadashel kadosh baruch hu. A person who's sham like a lashon shuma, shaman, a person who evaluates all of their actions. So they will be able to see the salvation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Shneimar v'sham derech, I'll take v'sam derech, I'll take v'sam, don't read it v'sam, ela v'sham. V'sham, that a person has to evaluate all of their actions so that they're doing things in the most perfect possible way. V'sham derech, erenem yesh elokim. Such a person will see the salvation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Yanai Yavalei, Hal Tamida, Rabbi Yanai had a comment, he would always ask him kashis in the middle of Shir. The Shabbos of the regular lo Makshile, but it was the big Shabbos like Hagadol Drasha, and everybody's coming from all over, and they want to behold like the great sagacity of this, great rabbi. So even if he would have a good kasha, he would keep his mouth shut. Kari aleh, and he applied the pasuk v'sham derech arena b'yesha elokim, that he's making a judgment. He doesn't want to make the rabbi look bad in the eyes of others. It's like such a big occasion with people who want to see the prowess of this rabbi's learning. So he doesn't want to diminish it in any way. So apparently the Yosameach is a story. Yosameach was somewhere, and there was a person who was asking, kashis of the rabbi, like some big drush that the rabbi was giving. And the Yosameach got up and he said, this person who's asking the kasha doesn't know his right hand from his left hand. So therefore, nobody took his kasha seriously, and it was an embarrassment to the rabbi. And the Yosameach explained to the person afterwards, your kasha was a good kasha, but you don't know your right from your left because you didn't take the sin in the pasuk v'sam and turn it into the right side and make it v'sham, to understand that you're not supposed to ask kashas when it's a public lecture and embarrass the rabbi. Lo, let's in kasora. So Tana Rabbanan. So you have a brayso that says, aim at signing lo al kazayas of mina mesol let's in kasora. So you don't make grave markers next to a kazayas mina mes if there's an olive worth of volume from a dead person's body, or on an etzem kisaora if it's a bone that has a barley volume to it. But so it would be matami if you touched it, but it wouldn't be matami. But so you don't have to make a tzion, you don't have to make a grave marker because people aren't probably not going to touch it, and you don't have to worry about somebody walking over it. They're not going to become tummy. And you don't put a grave mark on anything else which is not matami ba'ol. But something which is matami ba'ol, which would convey uncleanliness of a person just passing above it, like for example the spinal column, which conveys tumas oel, balgugolis, or the skull of a person, which also conveys tumas oel, or opinion, majority of the bones, like if you have the two lower legs plus a thigh bone, altogether would be considered the majority of a person's skeletal structure. But minyan so you have like 145 or so bones, so that it would be more than half of the person's bones, or even 125 for that matter. And you also don't have to do a tzion if everybody knows that this is like a graveyard where people are buried, so then you don't need to warn people to stay away. They'll know to stay away. But if it's a suffix area where people wouldn't necessarily know that there is a dead body there, so then you have to make a grave marker. What are the spekos cases? Spekos cases would be, for example, where there is sechakos, you have tree branches that are sort of on the side of a base hakvaros, and there might be like an area on the side where if people are in a rush, they might bury, and the tree branch goes over it. So if a person is going to be underneath the tree, so then they're going to receive tumas oil. Or we know that there is a tuma under one of the branches, but we don't know which one. So therefore, it's important to make a grave marker so you know which one. But pros are if you have protrusions from, let's say, a wall, and there's somebody that's buried, underneath the wall, and you have protrusions that are coming out horizontally from the wall. So if a person would be underneath the protrusion, so then they would also receive the tumas oil. Uveis hapras, or if there is a field where there was a dead body that was buried in the field, but we don't know exactly where the dead body was buried in the field. We'll see there are different types of base pras. And you don't place a tzion in a place of tuma. What does this mean? That you don't place the grave marker exactly where the dead body is, because then when the person discovers the grave marker, it's going to already be too late, and then they're going to become tameh, and they won't be able to eat taros. So if they're carrying taros, the taros will become tameh. But you also shouldn't put it too far away, because then you're preventing people from walking like throughout like the entire country. If you're going to say, There's a dead body here, so don't enter within 5 miles. So nobody's going to be able to walk anywhere. So it should just be like a little bit removed from where the grave is. So people will have sufficient time to be warned to stay away from the tumah, but they'll also be able to traverse the rest of the area. So what do you mean? We said that a kazayas min mace, you don't have to make a grave marker for kazayas min mace, but kazayas min mace is mitami ba'oel. For how we have a Tanan, a mission that says Elam Shem Tamin Ba'oel, kazayas min mace. If you have an olive's volume of flesh, from a dead body, so it is mitami ba'oel. So I'm a papa here. We're talking about kazayas min sum maskina. We're talking about it's only exactly a kazayas. It's only exactly a kazayas. So it's only a kazayas. It's going to eventually shrinking. When it shrinkens, in terms of its volume, will decompose. You'll have within a couple of days, it'll be less than a kazayas. So mixed it'll be less than a kazayas within a couple of days. So why prevent people from going into this area forever? It's better that a person will make a mistake and not know about it, for the first day, and that person will have to burn their tumah v'kachim that entered into the area that they touched afterwards without knowing that they became tamei. As opposed to a person thinking that the area is tamei, so that they're always going to have to say, "Oh, my tumah v'kachim became tamei, so now I have to burn them." No, you're not going to have to burn them because after a day or two, it's going to decompose, and you'll have less than a kazayas. So the first day, so a person might make a mistake. How will he even know he makes a mistake if there's no grave marker? Because everyone will know the first day. Once a kazayas was just buried there, so the world will know. One person makes a mistake, it'll be pointed out to him. So what are the spekos cases where you need to have grave markers? Sechachos u'peros. So we said that if you have the tree branches, right, the sechachos, and if you have the peros, if you have the protrusions from a wall. So what are those cases? Sechachos ilan amesach ala aretz. That's if I have a tree and the tree branches are underneath, are hanging out, and there's tumah, as Rashi says, tachas nof echad. One of the branches has tumah underneath, and we don't know under which the branch, so we make it sion. You should just stay away from the tree. Pros, what are the pros? Avanim pruos hayotzos that mean hageder. If I have stones that are protruding from a fence, and that there is the tumah, and there is a dead body that's buried underneath, so therefore the protrusions are going to spread the tumah. Base of pras. What's the case of the base of pras? If you have a dead body that's buried in an area and you plow the area, so it makes it into a base of pras. That's one kind of base of pras. That's a base of pras where we would assume that any kind of bones got crushed up. So you're not going to have enough of a volume in one place to spread too much oil. And a Kohen could actually walk in that area, right? If he blows the area in order to make sure that he's not encountering any bones, he's not going to actually physically touch any bones, because if you physically touch the bones, even if it has an etzem kisora, that would make him tummy. So so when you thresh the area, you plow the area, so a vicinity of 100 amos is going to be implicated. You have to worry that the bones got spread into that area. It's the question whether this line really belongs. But a base of process, as I just said, that type of base of process is not metame bi'ol. But I'm a Rav Yehuda Mashmuel, base of process. We just mentioned a person can blow, a Kohen can blow into a base of process and walk along in order to make sure that he's not going to physically touch any of the bones for Olek, because there's only tumas maga, but no tumas oel. Rav Yehuda Barami Mishmei Deula Amar base of process shenidash tor. You have a base of process that was completely threshed, so it's going to be tar. You don't have to worry about a tumas oil anymore. So I'm a papa lo kasha. No kasha. There are two different types of a base of process. One base of process is a field where there is a complete body, which is attacked, which is buried there, and you have to worry if you walk in that area, maybe you walked above the body, and therefore you receive tumas oil. That's one type of base of process. That requires a grave marker. And here we're talking about when we say that it doesn't convey tumas oil, so presumably would not require a grave marker. We're talking about a field where there was a body that was buried. There was a grave, and the grave got plowed. It got plowed over, so therefore now you don't have any parts of a body that will spread tumas oil. The word here should be ovid. You mean to say that a sada where it was a body that was not plowed over, we're going to call it, we just don't know where it is. It's somewhere in the field and we don't know it's ovid. We don't know where it is in the field. Is that really called a base of pras? And yeah, that's called a base of pras, because there are three different types of a base of pras. Shlosha Besa Prastein. There are 3 different types of Besa Pras, and you know what? This is one of them. Sada Sheneva Kever. One is a Sada where the Kever just got lost. That's what we're talking about, and you need a grave marker because a Kohen has to stay away. A person who wants to eat Truma or is carrying Kachim has to stay away from that area because they might go over the dead body and receive Tumas Oel. And the second type is Sada Shnekvash Kever, is a Sada where there was a Kever that was plowed over, and therefore there are only bones that remain and it would not convey Tumas Oel. The Sada Bochin, and the Sada, some of the have the Girsa Kuchin. But Sada Bochin is our Girsa, the Sada where they cry over because it's a place where they temporarily, people who are handling like a burial, they'll carry the body to this place. It's like a handover spot. The people are bringing the body to this particular place, and then there's like a Chevra Kadisha that meets them there, and they wash the body. Rashi even says they wash the body, and then they'll bury it somewhere else. And sometimes in the process of bringing over the body, a limb will fall off and nobody will notice, whatever that means. My Sada Bochin, why is it, what's a Sada Bochin? Savav Yeshua Barabba Mishmei Dulamar, Sada Shmaftim Bamesim. It's a Sada where they kind of pass over the mace during the burial process. So one group delivers the mace to another group. The time of my, what are we worried about? So Amar Avim Mishum Yush Ba'alim Naguba, because of the fact that it's a Yush Ba'alim. And since it was brought from a very far place, people are already kind of like tired and worn out. That's what Yush means over here. They're not necessarily paying attention if a limb is going to fall off. So therefore, there might be a limb that will end up in that spot. So now we just got through saying that when is it that you require the grave marker? You require the grave marker if it is a field where there was a grave that was lost in the field. We just don't know where it is. But if it was plowed over, then it doesn't require a grave. It doesn't require a tzion. It doesn't require a grave marker. But there's a brisa that indicates that even if it was a plowed over field that had a grave in it, it would require a tzion, because the brisa says, Matzah sadim and tziyanis, if you found a field that had a grave marker, and you don't know exactly why, what the nature is of, where there might be a grave. So the way you can figure it out is like this. Yeshba ilanos, you don't know what kind of field it is. If there are trees, so then it's not going to have too much oil, because this is a field where, just like you had to plow the field for the trees, so you have to plow the field in general. So it would have been plowed over the grave, so you don't have to worry that there is a grave that's intact, or that has enough bones that are intact, or with the size that would convey too much oil. But if there were no trees, so that it wasn't plowed, but you do a sha'avid bakever, and then it says sha'avid bakever. But the implication is that it could be a sada mitzuyanis. There could be a field with a grave marker where there's not going to be too much oil, because it's the type of base of brass, which is sada shenekosh bakever. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer, hey sham zakin otamin. Rabbi Yehuda says that you can only come to the conclusion that it is a field that doesn't convey too much oil if you have like an old man or a Talmud, or somebody who's like a Talmud Chacham who has a tradition, who can tell you as to what exactly the nature of the field is. But you can't just infer what the nature of the field is on the basis of the fact that there are trees. You can't say, oh, there are trees that must have been plowed. The Fishena Kol became a dover, because most people are not proficient to know if it's only a Sadash Nechvash Bakeva. You need a tradition, you need a Masorah from a Zakin or a Talmud, from an old Jew, right? So I'm a Papa Kitanya, or a learned Jew. So I'm a Papa Kitanya, so a Papa explains the reason why there might be a grave marker, despite the fact that it's a Sadash Nechosh Bakever, is because it may have started out as a Sadash Avad Bakever. I'm a Papa Kitanya, yes.
People don't bury somebody near a tree or near a.
Right.
Right.
But the entire
So
I thought it was like an accepted practice, it's shady or whatever, I don't know.
that what the people.
People used to bury people near trees.
Yeah.
near
Okay.
mark, near
So why is that the
clear.
tree is the marker that says,
Right.
oh.
No,
nothing there.
because if it is a field of trees, so it's going to be plowed on a regular basis, not just going to be plowed the first time that the trees are planted. You're going to plow it like every single year. You're going to continue to plow it. Okay. A field of trees just gets plowed. You have to take care of the field year after year, so it's going to be plowed. Okay. That's the assumption. So I'm a Papa Kitanya. So Papa says, no, you're in Echinam. If you're dealing with a base of Prashanecharash, it wouldn't require a grave marker. But here we're talking about a field that a grave was lost in it, and they put up the grave marker, and then only afterwards did they plow the field. So that's the reason why it would have had a grave marker. But if in fact there would have been a grave that immediately was plowed over, you never would have had a grave marker. So I'm the same new, and they originally put up a tzion, and now I see that there are trees. So yesh ba'ilanos, then biyadua shenecharosh bakeber. So now I know that it must have been plowed over after they put up the grave marker, and that's why I don't have to worry about tumas. But not that I would put up a grave marker after I already knew that I had a field where there was a grave that was plowed over. But if there are no trees, so then I know that it has the intact status of a field where there is a kever that's in there somewhere. I just don't know where it is. So then I would have to avoid that area. Even if there are trees, why shouldn't I be worried? Maybe the trees are on the inside of the field and the kever is on the outside of the field where it wasn't plowed over, and therefore maybe I have a grave, I have a person's remains that have not been plowed over that are still intact. So Kedama Ulas, so the explanation is like Ula says, the Omden al Hagivulin, where we're talking about where the trees are on the very border, and the trees are on the very border. You're not going to bury a dead body into the Rishus Harabim, so the dead body therefore is not going to be past the trees. How can I maybe Omden al Hagivulin? And we'll stop there. Okay. See you.